presentation about math. It's going to be a little interactive. I'm going to ask you guys some easy questions. I hope at least one person would say something, anything. But the reason I chose persuasive instead of informative is to give math some appeal that usually doesn't have. People are scared of math in high school. There's a lot of math, geometry. I had that one teacher, I didn't like him, but anyway, let's get on with it. So, I have 3 images here. Can anyone tell me a similarity between any of these images?
They're groups.
Anyone else?
They are all mammals.
Oh, very good. All right, I have another slide here. So actually,
They're still all groups.
I like that answer because today we'll be covering groups.
Woo!
So groups are a mathematical object. So in math, at the higher level of math, I'm talking way past calculus. We're not doing any more calculation here. We're trying to abstract things to make greater conclusions about a greater amount of things in math. It sounds very abstract, but I'll concretify it a little bit. So groups. Groups are just a group of things. I'm sorry to use the word group in the definition. You can replace it with collection. Group is a collection of things, along with a way of adding them together or multiplying them together. So all there is there's an operation and there's a set of items. So 1 plus 1. I have 1 and a 1, and I have a way of adding them together. Can anyone guess what this is? All right, everyone guesses correctly. Good work. It's 2. Yes. So now I'm going to present a little more abstract concept. So 2 tigers. I have 2 tigers, maybe from the group of animals, for instance. What would I get if I added 2 tigers together?
2 tigers.
Excellent. 2 tigers. It's very obvious. But, all right, anyway. The next property that groups obey is that groups are closed. What does that mean, closed? Is it like a store? Are they closed at like after 9? No, they're not. They're actually, what closed means is that if you add 2 items from a group together, you don't get something outside of the group. For example, let's say I have the group of fruits, a pineapple, apple, strawberry, cherry, and orange. Very simple. Okay. So let's say I were to add an apple and a cherry. Now, I'm not going to try to guess what adding these 2 fruits is going to give me. I mean, I could just get an apple and a cherry. That's fine. But what I won't get is broccoli, because broccoli is a vegetable. And that's the vegetable of groups. So groups are closed, as in they're like a tight-knit neighbors, you could say. So, another property of groups is that every group has a 0. You can think of this as an identity element. For example, 0 plus any object is the object itself. 0 doesn't affect the object. It's almost like, you think of it as 0. Anyway, for you math nerds out there, every group has the identity, right? It's the identity. For example, when you multiply any number by 1, you get the number itself. When you add 0 to any number, you get the number itself. So, I'm going to define a group of animals soon. So I have a cat. And I have here, I'm going to call this the 0 animal. For example, the no animal. You see here a barren tundra. There is no animal here. This is part of our group of animals. It may not seem like an animal, but it really is the 0 animal, you can think of it. Now, when I add the 0 animal to this cat here, which is a cat of my friend, we're going to get the cat itself. Nothing changes. It's just like when you add 0 to any number. It's just the number itself. But we're abstractifying. We're taking the essential properties of the numbers, of the integers, and we're giving them to other things. It could be anything. Anything can be true. Another very important property about groups is that every group has an inverse. For example, let's say we have the integers. We know that 1 has an inverse. It's negative 1. Because when we add the 2 together, we get 0. And this is true for any number. Any number has a negative. When we add the 2, we get 0. Now, I'm going to define a new animal called the anti-tiger. And I'm going to include this animal in my group of animals, such that when I add the tiger and the anti-tiger, you can think of this tiger as maybe being made of antimatter, right? So that when they collide, they combust, and that's it. We have the zero animal, the empty tundra. And lastly, another final property of groups that is, you can think of as obvious, is that groups are associative. What does that mean? So if I have 3 tigers, if I choose to add the first 2 as opposed to the last 2, that doesn't affect the total of tigers. I still have 3 tigers. Or for in this instance, I still have 3 ones. I have 3. 3 equals 3 no matter where I put the parentheses. So that is the last group property of groups. Groups are very simple, but they're omnipresent in math. And there's a lot of higher math that deals with groups. So I'm going to show our group of animals here in a very nice visual way. So we have my cat on the left, we have an octopus, giraffe, cobra, we have tiger, and so on. And then we have their antimatter counterparts, as well as the zero animal. So this altogether forms a group of animals. So here's an arc. And now here I put all the animals. So maybe Noah put the group of animals in the arc and then stuff it over. That's just a thing. So anyway, lemma. What is a lemma? For those of you that haven't taken math, a lemma is just a preposition. It's just another fancy way of saying preposition. I'm going to make a statement, and you guys are going to have to judge if it's true or false. So I say that there is a bijection between the group of animals and the group of integers. Bijection, that's a funny word. What does that mean? All it is that a bijection is that the group of animals and the group of integers have the same number of items. That's simply it. There is a one-to-one correspondence between them. Now, I'm going to say this is true for the sake of this question. I'm going to say that there's infinite animals. Let's just say there's as many animals as we want. Because there's as many integers as we want. We can just keep going in the other direction. There's as many anti-animals as we want. Anti-integers. Here's a nice visual way of putting it. So we have all the normal animals on the top, and they go on an infinite list. And we have here the positive integers. They also go on an infinite list. We also have the anti-animals, and we also have negative integers. So we can find a one-to-one correspondence. Each integer, we can assign that to each animal. But then we also have 0. 0, luckily, we have the 0 animal. So we can assign 0 to the 0 animal. Thus, here we have a nice one-to-one correspondence between groups, which is really nice. Here's a question. A lot of math textbooks like to have this thing. So that's why I put a question for the reader. Are the group of animals and the group of integers isomorphic? That's a very silly word, I know. What it really means is, are these two groups the same? Do they all capture the same essence? And in order to do that, we know that they have the same number of items, but we don't know how they add. We know that 1 plus 1 is 2, but we don't know if a cat and a tiger gives something too. I didn't say how to add animals together. I know how to add a tiger and a tiger, 2 tigers, but I don't know how to add a tiger and a cobra, an octopus and a flamingo. So maybe not, but I just have to define addition on the animals. I have to create addition. It's a little weird, but yeah. I'm going to get into multiplication tables. A very simple concept, a very rudimentary concept. We learned this in kindergarten. We have numbers between 1 and 10, and on the other side we have also 1 and 10. And to find how they multiply together or add together, we'll get to that. We just have to find their intersection, and that's their value. That's how they multiply, that's how they add. So there is a counterpart for groups. They're called Cayley tables. For example, here is a Cayley table of my cat. We have, on the top row, we have my cat and my anti-cat. And on the other column, we have my cat and anti-cat. So if we want to add my cat and my cat, we just find their intersection. Luckily, we get 2 cats, just as we defined. And if we go and add my anti-cat and my cat, we find their intersection, and we get the no animal, the 0 animal. And if we add my anti-cats together, we get 2 of my anti-cats. just as if I were to put, for example, 1 and -1, they would be the same. So here's a Kaylee table that I made as a little funny image for my friend of, there's me, and then there's 4 of my friends, or 3 of my friends. And basically, it looks really complicated as we look, but we have this little funny guy as the first, is the little black-haired guy. And we see that if we add him, or if we multiply him to any other person, we get the person back. So he almost functions as 1. So when you multiply him by anyone else, you get himself back, which is cool. And look, if you multiply 2 of myselves together, you get him back. You get 1 back. So this, in math terms, this is the integers mod 2, product the integers mod 2. You guys don't even know that, but if you want to look that up, you can look that up. But I just put faces over it, because it's a lot easier to see, to be honest. Some real life groups. We have the integers, of course. We have the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, -1, all that, and we can add them together. But we also have the rotations of a Rubik's Cube. This is a little less obvious, but if I rotate the face of a Rubik's Cube, and I rotate another face, you could call that adding. We compose the rotations together. We can compose them as much as we want, and eventually, let's say we have a scrambled Rubik's Cube, we can compose rotations to solve the Rubik's Cube. This forms a group, and is the group of rotations of a Rubik's Cube. So 0 in this group would be not rotating it at all, or rotating one face 360 degrees, because that doesn't affect the Rubik's Cube at all. That rotates the face back to itself. And also the doors. The doors is a famous group, I would say. I like the doors. A little technical, but here's another group. It's called the free group of rank 2. And all it is the collection of words composed of 2 letters. It can be any letters in any string that we want, in any infinite string. So we can form a letter or a word by going right twice, starting at the center. We can form the word AA by going twice to the right. We can form the word BB by going up twice. We can form the word AB by going right and then up once. So every little path counts as a word. And this has a lot of applications in higher level math. It allows you to, there's this contradictory result called the Banach-Tarski paradox, which lets you take a ball and decompose it, take it into pieces, decompose it into pieces, and reconstruct the same ball, but twice. So it really is a paradox, because it kind of counteracts massive volume, your intuition. I'm going to be getting into applications of group theory. There's one application called Galois theory, and it has a lot of prereqs. I mean, you can satisfy these in 1 to 2 semesters, don't worry. So there is a lot of beautiful historical context between this theory. Back in the 1800s in France, we've had a lot of French revolutions. Charles X succeeds Louis XVIII, and Louis Philippe succeeds Charles X, the July Revolution, and all that. And it's a tumultuous time. And during this time, there lived a man, and his name was Évariste Galois. And this man was young. He was applying to college, and sadly got rejected from his favorite school twice. Then he went to the École Institute in Paris, and he started studying there, and he contacted the really well-known mathematicians at the time, and they didn't like his work. They simply didn't think he was legit. They didn't like his logical reasoning. They think he made too many gaffes in his logical reasoning. And this led this man to be a very tumultuous man. His father was a staunch Republican. And so, after getting rejected from his favorite school, he went out and took up arms and joined the Republican Party in this time in France. And then gets arrested because he was holding on to himself a lot of guns and knives. He was leading this march, and he was in jail, and he wrote lots of letters, continued studying mathematics, and he kind of changes the perspective of mathematicians, because you think mathematicians to be kind of nerds. This guy, He was a fighter, to say the least. Near the end of his life, he died in a duel. In a duel for either a political reason or for some kind of romantic reason. We don't know yet, but it's such an interesting idea. There's also, he got expelled from the school that he was at because he sent a letter to the president of the school that was very blistering and very, very mean. But he managed to advance math. He invented this idea of groups and thus formed the topic of Galois theory. Galois theory, he basically said, let's take everything in math that we have, our numbers, let's say we have our polynomials, we have our functions, our graphs, and apply this idea of groups to it. And so, we learned in high school that there's a quadratic formula. We can just plug in the coefficients of a polynomial and we get the answers to our roots of any quadratic equation. We have this equation for polynomials with degree 3 and degree 4 as of now. But we don't have one for degree 5. For example, a function like this, which has a degree 5 in it. There is no explicit formula for the roots of this polynomial. And he proved that meticulously. It was obvious at the time, but no one had proved it at the time. And so what he did was he laid the foundation and managed to prove that these polynomials did not have any explicit formulas for their roots. And this was a major step in mathematics. This is an important quote that he wrote in his letter. He wrote this letter in jail after he got inebriated for the first time. He says, and I tell you, I will die in a duel on the occasion of some coquette de basse étage. Why? Because she will invite me to avenge her honor, which another has compromised. Do you know what I lack, my friend? I can confide it only to you. It is someone whom I can love and love only in spirit. I've lost my father, and no one has ever replaced him. Do you hear me? And this was on the 25th of July, 1831. So that just gives you a little sneak peek into his mind at the time. Makes him real, makes him human, even though this was around 200 years ago. And that's it.